I'm so good.
Awesome.
Got a
Good
double.
workout today?
Yeah, actually, I did one of those. Remember like the circuits we do when Dalton was here?
Yep.
Where it's like 10 exercises
Yep.
of just beat down.
Yep.
Did one of those. I'm trying to get
I saw that.
trying to get in vacation shape. For
Get that. Yeah, you
when we
can
leave.
trim that down in a couple weeks, eh?
Yep. So
Yep.
it was good. It was good.
I've been getting lots of cardio in now.
You have been. That's true. Big cardio guy.
I did. No, I'm not a big cardio guy, but I guess I am. Just need to now.
In what way?
I just think it's for my age and for the toll I put on my body. I think it's a wise thing to do now.
Yeah.
So
definitely good
with
for you.
lifting.
Yeah.
So,
Still do lift.
like just for example, when I was in Guelph on the weekend, on Saturday, did a couple things with. I wanted to get into more sprinting again, and running. I actually would like to run again. Like let's do some hour-long runs and stuff. That's not my favorite thing to do at all, but I think it would be beneficial to me and easier on my joints. So you think. So I was out doing. I think I told you this. I was doing the running football fields, like sprinting football fields. So once I got to about, I think length 8 or 9, because my goal was to get 15 good sprints in. 8 or 9, I was hearing like what sounded like there was something in my pocket, like cracking. Yeah. So I said, I don't have anything in my pocket. And then I was paying attention. It was my knee. It was just making a click, like loud. It wasn't painful, but I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
So then I did a few more, and then I said, well, I better just keep moving. But I didn't do the hard thing. And then I would touch my knee after. I'm like, oh, that's not good. So the running, I don't know. It's weird. So that's why I'm just spending a lot more time just getting like those long sweats in before and after workouts.
Yeah.
And getting some bike rides in and rowing and stuff just to see how we go.
Yeah, I don't know, like, because the common thought is that like the more impact on your joints, the worse it is for your joints.
Yeah.
But I don't really know how true that is. Like,
I know
because I haven't seen it like any studies and like stuff on that. Like it's obviously true. There's more impact on the joint.
Yeah.
But whether or not that's damaging or helpful is hard to say. It's probably actually like a bit of a spectrum. It's like there's a certain amount that would be good, and then once you hit past a certain threshold, then it starts to be damaging.
Yeah.
But it's like, is it if you don't run ever, like is that better for your joints that you don't?
Yeah,
they never have to feel the impact.
This is what
It's
I'm
like
saying. You don't want to just sit there and say, "Oh, that like
yeah,
lift weights, I'm sore." That's no good.
Yeah.
No, that's not necessarily true. Of
That's
course,
like
your joints are going to be sore. Of course, your muscles are going to be sore. Of course, you're going to have something that's not comfortable.
Yeah.
Or get tweaked. So maybe it's just you work around
it's
it.
the move it or lose it
that.
kind of thing to me.
Yeah,
like maybe it's a bit of that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
So I'm going to continue going. I'm going to maybe do hills in another day or so. See if that's a different feeling on the knees. Probably is, but we'll see.
Yeah, you know what? The weather's good till like November.
Oh yeah,
around here too. It's not where it's not. Even if it's cold, it's fine.
Yeah. I just want to trim up a little bit.
Yeah, it's good. Get back into your flow. Did you have something else you want to start with, or do you want to get into a topic?
Well, I have nothing else to talk about, like for bullshit. But I was so what worked out kind of neat today. Just before we were actually going to start our podcast, one of our our friends, or whatever we want to call them. That's probably not a compliment, eh?
Yeah, friend.
One of our friends, coach, customer, good guy.
Played hockey.
Oh yeah. He was played pro hockey. Coaches came in just before we're doing the podcast, and it was interesting because we're going to talk today about coaches, the perspective of coaches from what we liked and what we didn't like about certain coaches that we had, right? And it's going to be a kind of a fun little topic today. But before we did that, he walked in just as we were about to start, and we started talking, and he kind of just did exactly. Talked about the stuff that we always talk about. And he said, I love the podcast, by the way. He listens to it all the time. And it was so funny because he went through about 5-6 different things, both with players, hockey itself, parents, and another player that is being disappointed, and all the things that we talk about. And it was refreshing, actually, to hear what he says to people, like players and parents and stuff like that, because he tells the truth.
Yeah, he's got a good perspective.
Yeah, but it's funny. The perspective is, when someone has played the game, obviously the perspective is true, right? Or not true. It's more the vantage point is different, because the mom and dad or the people that haven't been through the game, everybody thinks, I hate using the word everybody, but oftentimes people think that the most important time is right now, and every little decision matters, and it's make or break. And if I don't do this now, I won't. My kid won't get that. He's missing out. He needs connections, and it's just not true. So it's just funny to see someone pop in and just have his perspective come in.
Yeah, it's funny listening to. It's actually really nice, like you said, listening to how he talks about, because he's right in the middle of it too now, right?
Yeah,
And it doesn't
too.
matter. It doesn't matter how much perspective you have. It's difficult when your kid is involved, or when that's your whole world right now. It seems like it's the most important thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see that even for somebody who's as right in the middle of it as he is right now, as a coach with his kid playing, dealing with parents and all that kind of stuff, like that's their whole world right now is their kids' hockey. Really, like that's what ends up happening,
Consumes a lot of their bandwidth.
Yeah, a lot of everything, a lot of their money, a lot of their time, a lot of everything. And they, for him to be able to talk about it still in terms of not being a crazy person is good, because it can be tough when you're getting sucked in. We were talking about like some kids like trying to get releases and moving teams and all this stuff, and it's like they're 13, man. Like it's like the biggest thing ever, and like parents getting in fights and like all this stuff. It's just like such nonsense. That's
the jealousy.
Jealousy. It's just so unnecessary. So it's nice when you get somebody that comes in and has that already built in. They don't need to be told, hey, like maybe settle down a little bit. So it's definitely refreshing. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, refreshing. For sure.
This is episode 100, by the way. Just throwing out. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I will introduce the topic unless you have anything else you want to say. Good.
I'm good.
So you had a good idea. So you told me about it this morning, and it was a good idea. Want to talk about? You said to me some of your favorite coaches, and maybe why. And my addition to the topic would be also talking about the bad coaches and what about them we didn't really like necessarily. So I have my own thoughts on kind of where I want to take it, but I kind of want to see what your thoughts are on the topic first, because I think it's really important that one, it's good to understand, like when people talk about the teachers that they've had before, it's like you have maybe of the 20 teachers you have in your life going through school, you might have 1 to 3 where you're like, that was a good teacher. And I think that's very similar for coaching. So it's not often that you get a coach that you really connect with and that does a great job. And I think just being able to pick out things that are good and bad, it can help you positively either way, whether you're picking out the negatives and the things that you don't want, or it can help you deal with tough situations with your coach and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of when you mentioned the topic today, that's kind of where my brain went with it. So I have a couple coaches in mind already on both sides, but I want you to start it off with what you were thinking about it.
Yeah, well, before I talk about my favorite coaches that I've actually played for or coached with or whatever, I wanted to just maybe paint a picture. Like if you watch the NHL, everyone's in love with. There's a couple coaches for sure, but one coach that always, from a player standpoint, other coaches, broadcasters, and everything, that stands out, in my opinion, head and shoulders above everybody, is Rod Brind'Amour. Would you agree with that? Like, I don't know if you pay attention to that as much.
I've heard that. I don't know enough to have an opinion though that is well informed, but I have heard that he would have been one that I would have mentioned if you asked me.
Yeah. So the question is why is he so, I guess the word beloved as a player's coach, but gets beloved, yeah. But why is he so loved by his players and respected by everybody? Well, number one, it doesn't, because he was such a good, hardworking player. That does not make him necessarily a great coach. But when he's demanding things from his players, he has that reputation of, well, number one, they always call him Rod the Bod for a reason, right? Do you know the story with him? No. So Rod Brind'Amour, when he went to Michigan State, that's where he went and didn't play junior. He went from young, went to Michigan State. Actually, a couple of friends of mine played with him, and they legitimately had to lock the gym out, take a key from him and lock him out, because he would go there like all the time, get pull-ups and work out, and he was just shredded. And they were like, you're doing too much, but that was his mindset, right?
Yeah.
So his work ethic was off the charts. He was a first-round pick in the NHL to St. Louis, and then He, obviously played. I think he played at 18 or 19 years old, and had a great career. Won a Stanley Cup, maybe two, but I know he won one with Carolina. And he was a workhorse, and he was a player that did everything, and he was intelligent and did everything. So then he got into coaching the Carolina Hurricanes, and he didn't change anything about himself. And I heard him do an interview recently, and he was saying, like, when I'm talking to the guys, and he's so cool about it. Like when he talks like as if he's a player. Hey guys, like it's not like that stern bullshit,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
He talks to them honestly, but he talks to them like he's one of the guys. And he goes, when I'm talking to them, I'm putting myself in that chair, so that, do I want to listen to this guy? Do I want to? Are they going to buy this message? And he goes, if I just put myself in that chair where I was not too long ago, then I feel like the relationship or the teaching is what I would want.
Right.
And so I was pointing that out because a lot of the times in coaching, and I guess this podcast was for coaches, really, more or less. I guess the bottom line is that when you're coaching, it's like people have an idea. I know a lot of times when people coach in youth hockey, they're all of a sudden they become a boss, and they're the boss of people, and they become a different person almost. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they're not prepared for it, or they just have a different idea of what it should be, and they're control freaks sometimes, or sometimes it's just chaos. So I just looked at Rod Brindamore as my first example of a really good coach that everybody likes and gets. So there's another question, right? Are you not supposed to like your coach? Because that was old school thinking, right? You probably remember that. My days, coaches were like, I'm the coach, you're the player. I talk, you shut up. I say jump, you say how high.
Yeah.
And it didn't have any reasoning for it. So I think I think the modern day coach, it's very, very important because players have changed, that you do have a communication, and rightly so, by the way, right? And there is a point where it's like, no, because I said so, but rightly so, there should be a communication. And the better that communication is, and the more that you can relate to the player, I think you're going to get better results, to me. So I used him as an example, and I think it's a great way to start off this podcast, because you don't have to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
And that's that for that.
Yeah, no, and just so people know, if you look up Rod Brindamore, he is absolutely dieseled, man. He is in ridiculous shape.
Yeah.
Even now. How old? What would he be now?
He would be 2 years younger than me, so he's probably 50, 51.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And just kind of circling back on this a bit too, as we say this for coaches, we say it for parents too, but I just think it's so important that to some degree you have to be doing the things you're asking other people to do, just so that there's just an element of respect that you're going to get because you do that as the coach or as a parent, whatever, but for this purpose, coaching. And that's something that stuck out to me. If I go back and I evaluate the coaches that I had, coaches where I thought highly of them, it made me so much more willing to do the things that they were telling me. Not that I wouldn't do them if I didn't respect them necessarily as much, but having that, it's just way easier to get buy-in from players when to some degree you do the thing that you're asking players to do. And I was watching, they have tryouts going on right now for some of the AA teams that are around here. And so I just popped my head out last night before I left, and they were doing like a bag skate at the end of the tryout. And that's fine. But the thought that I had in my head actually is I'm looking at the guys that are running the tryout, and it's just like none of you would be able to do what you're asking these kids to do.
Yeah.
And it's not that you have to be able to. It's not that you can't be a good coach unless you've done it, because there are exceptions, but it definitely helps if you have a perspective where you've done some of the things that you're asking other people to do.
Well, it's Rod Brindamore, right?
Right.
The guy's jacked. He worked hard. He's got everything about him is what he's asking his players to do. Right. So not one guy on that team could say, well, look at this guy telling me I need to be in shape. Well, yeah, he's telling you because that's what it takes.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just easier if you're trying to tell guys, hey, you need to do this. Hey, you need to be in shape. You need to be whatever. If you can do it or have done it and the team knows that, then it just makes it easier for them to, one, believe you, and two, to buy into what you're asking them to do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things that I remember. And when I think back to all the coaches that I've had, which is a lot, the difference maker for me in my relationship with the coach was always that respect element.
For sure.
And you can't demand respect. You have to earn it, and if
Yeah.
you're talking to your team, you're talking to your players, and you're trying to have that command of the group, that doesn't just mean you get the respect of the kids, and your insecurities as a coach, they'll come out. And because kids aren't stupid. It doesn't matter what age they are. They can read the type of person that you are. Whether or not they can articulate it and say what they think is a different question, but everybody can tell. It doesn't matter what age. They could be 7. They can tell when you're full of shit and when you're not. And I've noticed that.
They might not be able to articulate those words, but they're going to know something's off.
Yeah, something's
off. Weird.
And I've had that because I haven't coached a team, but I've been doing some version of coaching for over 10 years. And even when I have kids that are on the treadmill, they pick up on the things you're saying, and it's very, very obvious. So it's just, I think that's a really important thing. You can find a guy like Rod Brindamore where that's just such a good example of a guy that encompasses all of that. He's done it. He's been there. He tries to communicate well, and I don't know if it's solely because of him, because I don't know enough about Carolina, but they went from a team that was always kind of on the lower end, and the last few years now they've been one of the top teams in the NHL, and I don't think that is a surprise. I think the captain leads the ship to a certain degree, and so that speaks to what he's been able to do with that team at least.
Well, conversely, you look at the other side, and I'm not going to say names, but there's some coaches in the NHL that you just know they're dicks.
Yeah,
you just know all the time they're dicks, and it's about me. It's my show. It's about me. It's all that kind of stuff, and the guys hate them. And and I know people that I've talked to a couple of them, and they go, "Yeah, idiot, ass." Yeah, like no one wants to play for him. No, but might know X's and O's and might all know all that stuff, but it's ego. It's all this stuff. It's about you, right? It's all about you. Okay, cool. Yeah. No one wants to play for that guy. Yeah, now, as a player, it's, at that level, you have no choice. If you want to get ice and you want to play, you got a contract. You have to do your job, but you don't do it. You don't do it because you want to play for that guy. You're doing it for yourself and your teammates.
And that just to be clear, like that's the distinction too, because obviously the players have to play for you whether they want to or not. But that's why this is more geared towards the coaching, the coaches and the coaching side of it, because you are the one that is in control of how those relationships go. And if you want to have the most success that you can have, then there's certain things generally, like there's rules of thumb that you can follow that are really going to help you, or you can do things that are going to make everyone hate your guts. Yep. And you still get to be the coach either way. Yeah. But it's what kind of outcome do you want as the coach,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So
I'm going to start with my favorite coach.
Okay.
All right. You already know who it is.
I do.
Who is it?
Mr. Rose.
Mr. Rose. Yeah. The best.
Okay. So wait. So give me I want like some details of because I think this would be an interesting thing to do if we run through a couple of we're talking the age group around the time he was teaching you and those kind of things.
Sure.
And because it'll be interesting to see at what age the impact kind of was had.
Yeah.
So to speak. So go ahead.
Yeah. So he's the one that coached me the most. So he would have coached me, Mr. Rose again. Mm-hmm. Love him. So he would have coached me from, I think he was our assistant coach in minor Adam. Mm-hmm. So that's U9 or 9. And he would have coached me right through 2 years of Pee Wee, 2 years of Bantam. So I would have had him for probably 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the first year he was an assistant coach, but he was my favorite. Even though and when he was assistant coach, he backed off and just helped, right? He got involved a little bit, but okay. So impactful then. Why did I like him at 9 years old? Because it was the first time, and I mean, I'm only 9, but the coaches I had before were guys that, wore the jacket and they were usually the hockey dad, and that's okay. That's fine. That's cool. But they were goofy. And I was as much as I knew hockey was everything to me, right? It was everything. Like most kids, and I'm not saying I'm different, but I actually wanted to be really good at hockey at a young age because I had some jam to it, right?
Yep.
So the other coaches were kind of goofing around. You could just tell, as we said earlier, they didn't have anything to teach you about hockey.
Right.
And then when they did do things, like I was, I sound arrogant here, but at 8 years old or 7 years old, the coach would show me, or they would do passing drills, and it's like, well, that's boring. Like I would say that in
Yeah.
my head,
Yeah.
and I don't do it like this. It doesn't feel weird. I was processing that early,
Yeah.
so I was calling bullshit at 6, 7, 8 years old, right? Yeah. So there was that. So when Mr. Rose came in, it was he did extra. So number one is he was actually really involved. So he told us that we're going to do a lot of skating and puck skills is what he called it, right? And fitness. We're going to go after practices on Saturdays. And we're going to do fitness. So we didn't know what fitness was at 9, 10 years old. All we knew is that we did it. So to say that I love doing the running and the stairs and all that stuff at 9 or 10, I'd be lying. But
Yeah.
I didn't dislike it, and I didn't know the person, but I did it. But but one thing that stood out to me is that he did it. Like I swear to God, the one thing that stood out is that he did it. So number one, we had a lot of practice, and if he could get any extra ice ever, he would. And now looking at it as an adult, maybe he was a crazy dad too, but nonetheless, he was committed to it, and he had practice that we sweat a lot, we were moving a lot, and at a young age, that was good. As we got older into Pee Wee and Bantam, so 13, 14, that's when hockey got pretty serious. But what I did notice about Mr. Rose is that he continued with the fitness with us. His practices got better. And then as I would speak to him, I would ask him questions because he was very good to me. And when I would speak to him, I learned through speaking with him that he was always taking courses. So he got to the highest level of coaching certificates that you can in Canada. So does that mean anything to me now? Like, no, I don't think that makes you a better coach necessarily. But what it does, it showed me at the time that he was doing more to learn. And I mean that as a kid, I go, oh, wow, you're really learning some stuff. So he's got some ideas where a lot of coaches wouldn't do that. And he did. He had. So what I realized is that as a player, especially in my the years that separated me from all the other players was when I was 2 years and 2 and 3 years before my draft year. I separated myself from like a lot of like everybody, and it was important to me that I was the best hockey player ever because I was always at the top, right? So I wanted to be the guy. And Mr. O was always there to make our team better, but he was always there to actually individually coach me as well. Right? And I'm sure he did it with everybody.
Yeah.
So he learned the Hockey Canada stuff. I saw in our systems, and he had terms. So he always wanted us to, like, if we didn't have a play coming in the blue line, to tight turn it and regroup, which isn't a junior thing. Like, it's not normal, but it was his thing. So regardless of whether it was absolutely right, we had a system. Whether it was right or wrong, or the X's and O's were great, it doesn't really matter. We had a system, what I mean by that is that he had a plan, right? So he took some courses and he had a plan. And at that level, most coaches don't have a really good plan. So any plan kind of works, right? So he had a plan, and he put players where he thought were the best, and we executed, and we were a very, very good team. So you got to think about it. Sudbury, Ontario, when you're going to play, like, it's not a big city. And a lot of people don't even know where that is.
Yeah.
It's Northern Ontario. It's small, and we would go to tournaments in our Bantam years and win in the big tournaments. Like, I think we lost one tournament, but we went to tournaments and won the tournaments. Like in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Kitchener. Like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
From a bunch of ragtags from up north. We had 5 really good players, and the rest were like okay, but it was coached well. We were disciplined, and he demanded stuff from us. So that was really good. I'll just finish up with Mr. Rose. The other thing was, in Bantam, the last 2 years in Bantam, so the U6, U15s, and U14, we would run before games, every game. So a lot of guys, you imagine what parents are thinking.
Oh yeah.
But we would run before games. It would be like 45 minutes. Snowstorms didn't matter. We ran before games. A lot of guys didn't like that. Some days I didn't like it, but I embraced it because he planted in their head that we're doing things differently, and he explained Russians and Swedes and Finns doing stuff like this. So I just bought along. So every game so tell me we're in a good shape.
Right.
So was it the best training? I don't know. I don't know, and I don't care. But the beautiful thing about that, every time we ran, he was the first in line, and he was running. So he was a fit guy. He had a really good attitude. He was such a nice person. He wanted to help. He had a plan. He educated himself. Was he the best X and O's coach in the world? I highly doubt it, but it doesn't really matter because he came prepared.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'm going to say about Mr. Rose, I think, right now, is that off the ice, he was a teacher at my school when I went to high school. And I was standing with a bunch of headbangers. That's what we called them back then, right? Leather jackets, long hair, earrings, and stuff. And I was shooting the shit because I talked to everybody, right? Like horsing around. And he walked by and he saw me and he gave me a nod and all that stuff. And then he called me to no, we were at practice that next night or that night. And he came up to me, pulled me out of the dressing room, and he goes, "Andy, come here for a second." And he pulled me in the other room, and he was concerned. He was so deeply concerned. And he looked at me. He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "What?" He goes, "I saw you out there with those kids." He goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I was just talking." He goes, "No, you can't hang out with them. You can't hang out with them." And he goes, "Because you have a talent, and those kids are not good kids." And he was just like doing that thing, and he was like deeply concerned. And I said, "Oh, Mr. Rose, I won't do it anymore. Like I wasn't doing anything, but I won't do it." He goes, he was so concerned. He thought that I was probably smoking weed on the side and all this stuff, and he was trying to get me out of that right away. But to me, it was like he could have just said, "Hey, why are you hanging out with idiots?" But he actually grabbed me, and I could see his face like so concerned for my life. And I'm like, okay, now when he tells me to go and do something, he actually cares about my actual being.
Yeah.
So that's a whole lot about Mr.
Yeah.
Rose.
So just
and there's more.
yeah. So
But-
to put a bow on it, just so there's something that to take away. So would you say it was number one because you felt like he cared? Would that be the number one thing?
I would say later, because I think he cared.
Okay.
I think no. He cared about doing a good job. Yeah, I would say that's a big part.
So like
of it.
the reason you can flash back, you're 53 and you flash back to when you're 9 to 13 and you're like, I like Mr. Rose the best, let's say, because number one, is that number one because he cared about you, about his job, about he just cared?
Yeah, I would say his give a shit meter about coaching. He took the whole job and put it in everything about it. He put it as a very high priority in his life.
Cool.
I would say that, yeah.
So that, and then with, I think kind of secondary to that was that he came and he was ready to a certain degree.
That and that's the part that I think might be number one or number two. I don't know. I think the thing that impressed me the most about Mr. Rose is that, yeah, he cared about the whole thing, but he came prepared and in every way.
Yeah.
I know he didn't lose sleep over, or maybe he did, but he came with a plan and he came with a guy that was in shape, and he came in as an example.
So
that's a thing.
Sure. So there's two in no order, whatever. There's two, and then would the third be that, like you said, he kind of did the things that he was asking. Like you could see that he did it
for sure.
So would those be like a top three kind of thing? Like he was prepared, he cared, and he was doing the things he was telling you.
Yeah.
Like he was a good example.
Yeah, and I say if we can say four, he taught me without me really learning the lesson then, but he taught me that he was willing to put in the work too, because he did the workouts with us and he did the education part.
Right.
He always made himself better. Yeah. So it was like kind of like if he can do it, if he can do all that, then we should be able to do it too.
Right.
And I wasn't sophisticated as a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, but it was the truth.
Yeah, looking back, that's what it was.
Yeah, Mr. Rose. So I could look at him and say, so another way I would say this is that I could look at our bench and our dressing room and our practices and our games and say that he's all in, so I need to be all in.
Right.
He's an example I need to follow. I don't want to disappoint this person.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So, okay, that's cool. You want me to do mine?
I want to do one more thing here.
Okay, do one more.
So now, Mr. Rose, the funny thing is, this is the lasting impression that a coach can have on you, right? Of all the coaches I've ever had, this is the one person I've done this with. I've always kept in touch with him. I've always used him as an example because he was so fit and he was so far ahead of his time that we didn't even know. I'm good friends with his son still, Jono. Hey, Jono. He watches. But I'm such good friends with Jono, like a wonderful family. But Mr. Rose was always like, he knew about plyometrics. We didn't know, no one knew what the term was. and the energy systems. He had us go to the university and get our VO2 max done, and we're all like, "What?" But it was
Cool.
important to him, and I learned about stuff like that, and I think it had an effect on like my future, like in doing what I do now. And so I've always used him as an example. I've always appreciated the stuff that he brought me. Like even though, so even the fitness stuff might have been the biggest piece of it,
Mhm.
not hockey. And that's not a slight to his hockey. It was just the fitness piece and the commitment to fitness was kind of looking back. That guy was at 45 or 50 years old and grinding away.
Yeah.
So that was good. And then I've always kept in touch with him, except for the last year or so because of COVID and stuff. But Jono told me where he's at and all that stuff, and it's all good. But he stopped in here to visit me when he was in Florida. I'm hoping when Charlie plays in Sudbury this year, we're going up, and I'm hoping he's in town. But Jono says he usually goes to Florida in the winter. But I would love to bring him to a game with.
Yeah.
Anyways, but he came to visit me 2-3 summers ago with Jono. And when he walked in, I was just like, this guy's awesome. And you met him, right?
Yeah.
He was 80, 81, 82 at the time, 83. How old honestly, how old do you think
He was.
you would give him?
If I had to guess, I would have said he was like, I don't know, 65.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. He was in great shape. His skin was
Yeah.
and I'm
fresh as a daisy,
so
man.
he was still an example to me. And the great thing about it was he could have talked about the past, and we did a little bit, but he came in this gym and he said, "Hey Andy, you know what I've been thinking about? Because he goes swimming and he does golf and he keeps himself very active. He goes, but what I do now is I throw balls in a squash court, and so I got an idea for it. You ever think of like turning this way, throwing a ball and turning around, coming back and reacting?" And he goes, "I think it would help with a lot of kids' quickness and reaction and all this stuff." 83.
Yeah.
83. He's still thinking of things, and his mind is still going on how can you get better, how can it evolve. He's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of Mr. Rose. I got nothing bad to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the best.
That was great, man.
That's an endorsement for a human, eh?
Yeah. Well, how many coaches do you think you've had?
I don't know. Probably
Ballpark 7.
More. Oh no,
Just
more
hockey.
Than that. More than that.
Just hockey, though.
Yeah, more than that.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I had Mr. Robinson, Mr. Jackson, just a nice guy. He used to make me peanut butter sandwiches and give me milk. Mr. Something Else, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Rose for a bunch. Then I had all the assistant coaches. Then I had Mr. Bernard.
Oh yeah, I guess if you count
and
assistant coaches and stuff.
So like quite a few, and then junior,
right.
like 100.
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking head coaches. But so while you were talking there, I wrote down a couple names of some of the just head coaches and just hockey that I've had. So I wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 head coaches in hockey. 2 of them I would give a positive review. 1 of them I'd give them a and the rest of them like no good.
Yeah.
No good.
That's great.
So 2, yeah, seriously. But that's like the reality. That's why I was asking
what you
you.
Want.
No, and it's unfortunate, man, because it's like we have a horrible failing percentage on this. But anyways, so I didn't have one that was as impactful as Mr. Rose was for you, but I have 2 that are worth talking about. So the one, I'm not going to say his name, but he was my coach. He was my first coach ever in hockey. So he started coaching me when I was playing house league. Yeah, when I was like 5, and then he coached us right up to our first year of actual AAA when we were like 10 or something like that. And this guy was, he was just great. I was so good family friends with him too. And the reason I thought he was good, he didn't know a whole lot about hockey necessarily in terms of teaching the game and teaching like X's and O's and whatever, but he was a good motivator, and he actually tried to teach us, and I felt like he gave a shit about us. And that's something that lasted with me. So it's a similar criteria to what you were saying, not necessarily to the same degree, but we had like a workout thing that we had to follow. I remember we had like a trainer, and we had a card with like our workouts, and we had to like tick off what we did that day and whatever. And this was when I was 8, like playing Blue Water AAA hockey or whatever. And we had like workouts around our games. We had a practice schedule, and he was just like someone who was motivating, and he inspired us a little bit. And he just tried to teach us good qualities about life. It was nothing like ridiculous. Like it wasn't anything super crazy. And then the biggest thing that really made me respect him even more was when we were maybe 11 or 12. I might have the timeline wrong, but maybe 11, let's say. He stopped coaching us because he didn't think he knew enough.
Fair enough.
And man, what a what a I don't
No
even
ego
know
there.
what the word. Yeah, like I don't even know what the
Yeah.
word is. It's just like the humility to be able
Yeah.
to say, I can't keep coaching you guys because I can no longer teach you. That was the thing that lasted. So like his lasting thing with me was like, this guy has some self-awareness, right? Like this guy actually can make a good decision on behalf of like the kids that he cares about, whatever. And to this day, if I ever see this guy, like what a guy. Couldn't be happier to like talk to him and see how he's doing. And I don't keep in touch with him like you do, but I was friends with still I'm friends with his son. I don't talk to him too often. He's lives in Toronto now too, but that was one. And he was just the perfect coach for that age. So I'm talking, like I said, from 5 or 6, whatever, when I started playing house league to when I started playing AAA, those years, hugely impactful. So he was one. And then the second one I was going to talk about was Billy Bowler. So he was my coach. He was probably the first good hockey coach I ever had in terms of actual hockey. And this goes to all this like same things you just talked about, plus he played and was a good hockey player. So I first heard about him because he was coaching I played for Windsor AAA and he coached the Sun County draft year team. So he wasn't my coach yet, but I remember hearing about him as their coach, and they sucked. And our Windsor AAA sucked too, mind. We were terrible the whole way up. We were never good. At best, we were average a couple years. And I remember that draft year when he was coaching the Sun County AAA team, they tied the Marlies or lost by 1 to the Marlies at one of the Toronto tournaments.
Any big players on that team? I'm just trying to think who the big
On the Sun County team? Ecky's brother played, was the goalie.
Darian was in that.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And like Chris Scott played. I don't know if you remember him, whatever.
Yeah.
So they, and they weren't a good team. They weren't a good team. And I remember that being like, holy crap, you guys lost by 1? They lost 2-1 or something to the Marlies.
Yeah.
And it was like unheard of, unheard of. So that was my first thing. Like, okay, like this coach must be like the real deal. And of course, he's Billy Bowler. He set records for the Spitfires. He went on, he played pro and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the following year, he was my coach now. He coached our team. And the reason that he was great was because, one, he was so good still at hockey. So he was maybe mid-40s when he was my coach.
Yeah.
And he was unreal. Like, he was the best guy on the ice no matter what. We would play 3-on-3 games at the end of practice, or we would do shootouts, and he would score every time. He was by far the best. He could just see the ice, make really good passes and whatever, and it just validated hockey things he was teaching us.
Yeah.
So beyond the motivating or just like the being a good person lessons, it was, this guy actually can teach us hockey. Like, he knows how to play.
Yeah.
You know, and he did know how to play, obviously, for anyone who knows him,
set
right? So
in the OHL.
yeah, so
played pro.
So that was one. When he taught us systems, I wanted to listen to him because I knew where he had been. I knew who he was. And I was like, wow, that's something that is worthy of respect for sure. But then he also he was a bit of he had a goofy personality, and he's like he has a little bit of arrogance to him, but he could goof around, and he would like chirp guys and talk shit to the players on the team and whatever on the ice. So he wasn't the arms crossed, gruff, listen to me, when he could have been, because he actually knew his shit and he was good at hockey and he had this career, and he could have came in and been this guy that was just he coached in Toronto, and he was just could have had that arrogance about him in terms of his relationship with us.
Yeah, I know
you don't shut up and not talk to us ever, and just cross his arms and all that kind of stuff. But he didn't do that. He would talk to the guys. He would skate around, like when he coached me in junior as well, and when we were skating around the rink, like before practice, kind of just loosened up. He would be paired up with someone, just skating and talking with whoever it was. Not just the gruff guy not saying anything ever, right? So there was a human element to him that was nice, because we could talk about things that weren't just hockey. He would talk to us about things that had nothing to do with hockey, you know, and he got to know some of the guys and whatever. And a lot of guys didn't like him as it goes with coaches all the time. But for me, those were the two reasons that he was great for me. He was a really good hockey coach in terms of teaching the game, but he was actually a good person to me, at least.
Yep.
Right? To me, he was a good person. He cared about.
I'm sure he's a good person.
Yeah, and he cared about us. He would like pull us in for meetings. Like there was a couple times where I was going through a kind of a slump or something, and he would pull me in and be like, "Hey, like, what's going on? Like, let's talk this out," kind of thing. He wouldn't just leave me to flop when I'm
Yeah, it's huge.
16 and don't know what I should be doing, he would try to help, you know, and he would
Yeah.
actually care, and he would say things like you need to be a good person, don't be a goof. And there was guys on our teams that were goofs, and he would cut them, and
Yeah,
they would be
well,
gone.
and
You know?
that's important, because I think the other thing is like, not when you're coaching, not to get confused with just being a good guy.
Yeah.
There's
Right.
your job is, I always say this, your job is to number one, be responsible to the organization you're coaching. You got to try to win
Yeah.
and develop players, and number two, the players need to develop, and they need to, you're trying to do your best to help win, and parents are paying, so it's got to be a good hockey culture. So as a coach, you're assuming, you shouldn't have to assume, this is the way it is. You expect players are there for the right reasons. So when you're talking to someone and you're trying to make their game better or whatever, it doesn't have to be, I'm a jerk and you better listen. It's
Yeah.
you're on the same team, helping each other out. So he did a good job with that with
Right.
you. So the kids that don't want to get that message, yeah, the coach, you don't have time for them,
That's right.
right?
Yeah. And then the last part of that with him was he actually got results. And that was the other thing.
Critical.
So just to go over the track record. So when he coached the Toronto Nationals, or one of those teams. It was he coached Jeff Skinner. He was
Yeah.
his coach in draft year, I think, or
Right.
whatever. So whatever that means.
Yeah.
The good team, whatever. So that Sun County team that was no good coaches them to a close game with the best team in Ontario. So that's good.
Yeah.
Then with when he coached me in midget, coached again not a good team to a semifinal in the playoffs when we were no good. Then he started coaching me in junior because he brought me to the junior team that I played for the next year. Lost in the finals that year with a team that the year before was junk. Then he went to coach another junior team, brought them to the finals. Then he turns into GM of the Spitfires. They just lost in the finals last year.
He did a great job with
Did a
them.
great job with that team.
Phenomenal.
So it's like this guy now, like everywhere he goes, his teams are winning.
Yeah.
You know? And so on top of all of just the human stuff where it's like good guy, like seems like a good coach, actually teaches us the game, all that stuff. But then it's like he actually gets the result. Like he actually coaches good players and he actually sends players off to develop and go to other places, you know? And so that he was probably the most impactful in terms of hockey for me. And still, like, I keep in touch with him still.
Yeah.
But those are the only two.
Yeah.
And one was when I was, let's say, 9.
Yeah. There's a huge gap.
And the other one was when I was 16 to 18.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's just interesting to see that there's not like a given time or whatever. You never know as the coach. This is my point, I guess. You never know as the coach the type of impact you can have. Because I can have a 53-year-old tell me about when he was 9 and his coach.
Yeah.
And then you have a 28-year-old who's talking about when he was 16 and his coach, whatever. Like you never know when the impact. You can always have the impact.
Absolutely
is kind of the point that I'm getting at with at least with the positive coaches. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and negative too.
Yeah, and negative too. Just the communication style too, right? That's kind of like another underlying thread to what we're talking about is all the good coaches that I can remember, or even teachers for that matter, or across any sport or at school or whatever, they were all good or on the better end of the communicating spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like you feel like they actually have a way to speak to you and teach you something rather than just barking or yelling or, inarticulate or can't say what they mean, those types of things. Because that's always a problem too. Like I remember like bad communicators. It's like I had one coach I remember, this guy, just like his voice bothered me. Just the way he spoke. I'll tell you who it was again after.
I think I know.
You know who it is. It was like, and he was supposed to be a good coach. And it was like, could even speak, like could not speak to us at all.
Right.
And it was just embarrassing to listen to when you're in the room. And I was like 11 or 12. Like he was one of my next coaches after the coach I liked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was just a weird thing.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk a little bit just briefly because we kind of already covered the positives. So the negatives are obviously the opposite of the positives. But I wanted to point out just a couple things about some of the negative ones. Do you have anyone in your head, like a coach you had that was just like really no good?
Yeah.
Like a particular one that sticks out?
One I could give details.
Okay, go ahead.
I got, surprisingly, it was in the OHL.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can believe, this is incredible. My first year in the OHL, our coach was supposed to be a big time coach. He was a complete goof. Yeah. Okay. It was all about him. So are you ready? He never went to practices. So he didn't have an assistant coach. So we would be out in practice, and he did a couple times. Like actually, a couple times he came out for practice. Most times he'd come out with 10 minutes left and just yell at us or kind of see what's going on. Honestly, so then I don't want to go into the off ice stuff with him, but he was just someone that is just a complete
Belligerent. Yeah.
yeah. And then he'd come in unprepared. Or I mean, he's probably was a good coach at line matching and all that stuff. Okay, that's fine. But I didn't learn one thing from this guy.
Yeah.
And I was 16 years old. So you'd get off the ice. I remember coming on a power play. This is preseason, by the way. So I'm not saying I was on the power play at 16 years old. But we're in preseason. I was on a power play. Mind you, we haven't done one practice with this guy. He's never taught us one thing. Not a breakout, not a forecheck, not a neutral zone, not anything. You just go play hard. Okay. So I was on the ice on a power play, had the puck, and I came from having over 200 points. I'm not saying I'm right, but I had 200 points for a reason. It might not transfer into the OHL at the time, but I had 200 points for a reason. So I had the puck and I moved a little bit. I was looking for an opening. I had the vision, so I had this thing. So I made a play. Then the guy had a shot on net, didn't score, or whatever. So I got to the net, and he started reaming me for moving on the power play. You don't move, but and that's fine. But if he would have said, "Okay, Andy, on a power play, I need you to stand here and look for a play or do whatever." Or just that's what I want you to do. But if he explained it, that would be fine. But he gave me shit for moving on the power play. Well, you can't give someone shit for something that they don't know they're not allowed to do or do.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like, come on. So, and then he never taught. So he'd come up for never teach practice, just give guys shit. And it would just always be like, give guys 5 different things. Then he'd accuse guys if we weren't playing great or whatever. It didn't even matter. Come in and say, "Well, guys, the reason you guys aren't winning or you guys are playing like shit is because you've been out all night doing this, doing this, doing this." It's like we look at each other like, "What are you talking about, man?"
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he was doing all that stuff. So we didn't like him as a human. He wasn't a good coach, and there was no respect.
Yeah.
So you got fired, by the way.
Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah, but he got coaching. He was coaching again, and it's amazing how they got through. And that one sticks out because this was at a point when you think about it as a 16-year-old kid. This is where I have a little bit of resentment for, or this is I shouldn't say that. This is why when Charlie was going through it, I was like, I can call this bullshit because I understand the difference now. So if you have a guy that, and he wouldn't speak, yeah, it would just be jerk, right?
Yeah.
So you can go in as a 16-year-old. That was like make or break for me. Do you know what I mean? Like for a kid that didn't have
huge
necessarily
time.
confidence or like to have that, like I was a kid going into the league that had a lot of talent, but didn't understand all the inner workings and all that stuff, right? Like most kids probably.
Yeah.
So when I went into that thing and you're expecting, okay, I'm in the best league in the world at this level. I'm in the OHL. I'm at 16 years old, and I didn't learn a thing. I learned a lot of things not to do. That was critical to my development.
Yeah.
Like that's what I would expect, so when Charlie was going through it, like I was looking around and going like, there's places not very many, but there's places where I'm like, no, I can just go to college or we'll wait this out. Unfortunately he got to a great organization with a good coach and everything's great. But like, that's what stuck out to me. It's like that first year. And then the next year the coach they hired was like on the cheap too. No good. But this first guy was like, I don't want to say he ruined people, but he didn't help.
Yeah, he definitely could have set you down the wrong road. Yeah, from that
like
first
just
year.
like I'm not saying you have to. I'm not saying that he had to sit there and have a conversation and milk and cookies with you. I'm not saying that, but the important thing is that as if you're in that league, like Charlie's coach last year was, he wasn't like same thing. It wasn't having milk and cookies with them, but there was talk.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, Charlie, come here. How do you think you're doing? Okay. How's the billets? How's this? How's this? That's good.
Yeah.
If you ever need anything, come and talk to me. That's an open door. It doesn't have to be like a conversation and all that stuff, but it's a conversation. It doesn't have to be like all friendly and perfect and get into soft stuff. It's like I need to know you're good. Are you good? Good. Okay. Good. And I want this from you. That's okay.
Yeah.
Actually, that's perfect. but there has to be something to know that I actually give two shits about you.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you're dealing with kids, right? That's the thing that especially a lot, because you mentioned the NHL coaches, and that's a different thing, right? Because now these are teams of grown-ups for the most part.
Yep.
Right?
Young grown-ups.
There's young grown-ups, but for the most part, the average age in the NHL is 27 or whatever.
Sure.
So it's like those are grown-ups. So you got an asshole coach. Not that that's good, but you're at least a grown-up now and should have the tools to deal with it. When you're dealing with kids that are 20 and under, it's like these are kids. They're not grown-ups. They need to be taught. They need to be spoken to. They're still developing their brains, man. They need some guidance, and to take that opportunity and just throw it in the garbage as the coach because of whatever if it's ego, if it's you don't know, if it's at any level, it's a shame really for the kids, because now you get somebody like you who was a really good player when you were 16, and all you needed was somebody to just grab you and say, hey, listen, this is the track, follow this path, not this one. And you didn't have somebody there to help steer you, right? Even to just kind of keep you in the lines, just a little bit. It's like nobody was there.
And for some guys it works, and that's what are you going to do? But I would say that if you were to take 100 examples,
right,
some of players, some guys work very well with a kick in the ass, and that whatever you call it, 99% probably work better with someone that has some communication and some. I'm not talking
even the guys that do well with a kick in the ass.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
You'll never convince me that that's. I've had so many dads say that too. Hey, don't be afraid to kick him in the ass, and I'm like, I know, and I don't need your permission to do that.
Right.
But I also know that he's going to respond well with learning, just proper teaching.
Well, man,
and accountability.
For me, I've got the kick in the ass every day when I was a kid, a lot. And in some ways it's good. In some ways it's really not good.
Yeah.
And there has to be balance. There has to be communication. There's a time, like you said, there's a time as a coach to say, nope, it's this. And there's a time where you actually have to talk, and you actually have to have some compassion or some empathy for the fact that you're talking to a kid that's 13 or 17 or whatever. So there's two that stuck out to me on the negatives. I actually have way more negative. I could talk about the negatives like the whole episode.
Isn't it awful?
Oh, awful, dude, awful. I'm not gonna say the names when they coached me, because there's still people that are around. But so I didn't like these two kind of for the same reasons. So the one, he thought he knew everything. He didn't know much. And he also didn't do any of the things he asked. So I have a vivid memory of this one coach. This was kind of the break moment for me. I had several actually with him, but this one in particular. So he had a rule at practice that if you missed the net, you had to do 10 push-ups, right? So this was when I was older too. I was older. And I remember he did a drill demo, which he was terrible at. Like, he was no good. And he went and he missed the net. So all the boys were saying to him, like, hey, like, you missed the net. Like, follow your own rule, right? And he was, like, super tentative about doing the 10 push-ups. So it was probably, like, 10 seconds that he didn't do it. And I was like, which 10 seconds of standing there is a long time. So then he finally did it because we were all riding him about it. And he could barely do push-ups. Like, they were awful, like, awful. And you could tell, like, this isn't a guy that does anything fitness-wise at all.
Yeah.
And he could barely do 10 push-ups. And the expectation on us of, like, you always have to do 10 push-ups if you miss the net. I get we're the athletes, and you don't necessarily have to be the athlete.
What a way to say,
that's it.
Right?
Yeah. So it was just the way that he did it, the way that he went about doing the 10 push-ups. Like, that's something that stuck with me. Because I remember I was like, you phony, man. You are just a pretender. Everything you say is pretend. And it was just a really good example to me of all the things that had been happening up to then. And then even that was just like completely outside of his coaching style, just how he was as a person even. That was one. And the other one that I was thinking of was the exact same thing. He actually he knew more in terms of, like, the X's and O's and like teaching systems and structure to the game and all that kind of stuff. But the amount of bullshit that would come out of this guy's face was like, it hurt me to hear. It would actually cause me physical pain because I would get into arguments, not a lot, but I would go in, once I was on the more of a veteran player, I would go into his office to talk to him and just be like, why is this happening when you said this, this, and this? You know, or why are you reaming us out for this, this, and this when you know that it's only these 3 players on our team that are doing that, but you keep giving them opportunities. Things like this, where it was like your words and your behavior don't line up, you know? And if there's a way to get me pissed off, it's do that. It's like when it's just nothing but bullshit coming out of your mouth, it's like, dude, if you think you're getting buy-in from anyone on this team, you're not. When we leave this rank, all we say is how much of an idiot you are. Yeah. You know? And that's a shame because it doesn't need to be like that at all. You know? So it'd be things like making rules for both of these coaches I was talking about, making rules and not enforcing them, or selectively enforcing them, or not applying them to yourself. So you're not an example. You don't have a good communication style. You're not really teaching us a whole lot for the one coach that didn't really know hockey too well, but you're acting like you got it all together, you know? And that's that ego bit and whatever. And it wasn't as extreme, obviously, as when you're playing in the 80s with some of these rough and tough type of coaches. That was already kind of starting to phase out when I was getting older, playing junior and whatever. But it's the same exact principles. It's like, you didn't teach us, you didn't help to develop us, it didn't seem like you cared about anything, your communication was terrible, and you seem to leave a lot of guys that could have used a hand, they're just out to dry, and they're kids and you're an adult, you know? So across both of those, like those are kind of the negative things that stick out to me. I would love to get into more specifics and go through the other 8 names that I wrote down here, but
I gotta go through stories. I'm not a big fan of, actually, I wouldn't mind actually. I'm not a big fan of just, it sounds too negative, right? Because everyone's got a poor me story and stuff. That's not what this is.
No.
This is about your perception of a coach, and whether it's right or wrong, or it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So like, a coach is either gonna, and even if it's vanilla, like, yeah, he's all right, that's better than at least right. A good coach, not a much personality, that's okay.
Yeah.
But because you don't have to be best friends, that's for sure. But what I would want from a coach is like, I'm playing hockey, so I would like you to be able to give me something that will benefit my hockey.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, seriously.
Right, or don't coach. I don't see why you would coach unless you're really, really young, and it's just like you said, your first coach was more of a cheerleader and run some drills. That's fine. But when you're coaching, you're coaching hockey. Number one to me is that you know a little bit about hockey. You can bring something to the table. And then number 2 is if you can, at the end of the day, the kids are going to leave. Right? Yeah. And what was their experience? Most kids aren't playing in the NHL, OHL, college. Most kids are playing for fun, but they're playing to learn hockey. And like the one year that I coached Charlie when he was young, I asked them because the parents wanted me to coach, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's see. So I asked them. I said, I got 2 ways I can do this. I can coach for fun and just go and change lines and all that stuff, or I could coach to try to win. But I said, if like to try to win and develop you, but what comes with that is I'm going to be like expectations and stuff. And all the kids said, we want to win and we want to get better. I said, okay. So they gave me that, and that was important to me because I didn't want to just change lines.
Yeah.
So I got to teach them a little bit of hockey, and even though none of those kids went to a high level of hockey, they got to learn how to play hockey a certain way, the right way, and learned about hockey. That was the job, right?
Right.
And they appreciated it.
Yeah.
For the most part.
So maybe kind of wrapping up, first of all, keep in mind the distinction here. Like when you're saying we're talking about this, we're talking to the coaches in this episode, because as the players, which we've talked about this a million times, whether you have a good or a bad coach, we've talked about how to deal with that either way. That's not what this one's about. This is like we're talking to the coaches on this one. So maybe to wrap up everything kind of that we just talked about, what would be your, like, let's say 2-3 things that if you had to say, do these and you'll be an effective or an impactful coach, what are the most important? And then maybe they could be the exact opposite of the 3 positives, but like what are a few things where you'd be like, don't do that. That's something that in your experience hasn't been a good thing.
Well, it's always depends on the level, but I guess it really doesn't matter. Is number one, I just said it earlier, is you're coaching a hockey team. So please go in there with a little bit of hockey
Yeah.
or a lot of hockey. You don't have to be the best X's and O's coach in the whole world, but you have to bring something to the table for hockey. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but there's a lot of coaches in youth hockey that don't bring anything.
That was me
Hockey.
until I was 16, man.
I know. I know.
Legit okay, sorry to interrupt you. For people that have been in hockey or they have kids in hockey, when you're like 11, 12, coaches are now starting to like, because of all the Hockey Canada stuff, they start to implement some systems like breakouts and regroup. I didn't know what a D-to-D regroup was until I was 15 years old. We want to talk about no systems. Like we played the ping pong hockey, shoot it up the wall to get it out until I was 15, man. So for the love of God, know something about hockey, please.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Yeah. So that's what I would say is know something about hockey, take a course or two, and then have some sort of a plan based on what your team is. So that would be number one. Like as a coach, have a plan that you can stick to, and you know you can be malleable. You can be, I'm throwing words out. You can be flexible.
Unreal. Yeah.
Right. You can be flexible with certain things because you make adjustments. But this is the type of game that we should look like playing. Whether it works or not, it's something. Something's better than nothing. Number two would be have a communication skill of some sort. Like every player needs to be able to be able to talk to or be coached in some way. So be able to communicate something the best that you can. And then the third thing would be like all the kids are watching. Like, so this might be a couple things in one. So number one is that if you don't take care of yourself, I'm not saying you need a 6-pack, but if you don't take care of yourself, like basic hygiene, that's a good start. Right. Right. But and you're representing them properly. Like even if maybe a goal could be losing 10 pounds or 5 pounds. Like it's actually kind of important. Like being able to do basic fitness things with them. Like if you were going for a little like a warm up jog or a stretch or something, that you could do something to mimic it. Or if you're doing a drill, it's not like you could do some. So like having some type of fitness or be put together in some sort of way that it's respectable, because the kids will look at you physically. And if you don't have like some sort of presence that you're put together a little bit, I'm not talking like, again, not 6-pack. I'm just talking a decent, you're dressed decently, like, and you look
carry
like
yourself
you can
well,
carry yourself
yeah.
at least decently and have some confidence. It goes a long way. And along with that, carrying yourself is, don't be a bullshitter. Like learn the ability to be truthful, and sometimes you have to put velvet on a sledgehammer or to deliver the message properly, or sometimes you have to be brutally honest or whatever, but be honest with people and kids so that they know where they stand with you. So those would be like the 2, 3, 4, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. That's great. Are there anything on the flip side? Obviously, the negatives are the opposites of the positives.
Yeah,
but is there
pretty
anything
much
in particular that stands out that's a little bit different?
Well,
That's like
and don't
really
be
negative.
don't be like for me, it's like I see sometimes the coaches like they're neutered cats everywhere else in the world. What I mean by that is just like, and then they become a coach of a hockey team. They get a jacket, and they all of a sudden they know everything about everything, and they're control freaks in this one little area of their life. You know, it's 5:15, time for a warm up. 5:15. You know, let's go do our team stretch. And like they become control freaks or whatever. But I would say, yeah, the opposites. Don't like have a plan, but don't bullshit.
Yeah. That's cool. I think for me, the one thing I'll leave with too is there's a little another word that could be good is like you want to try to be like a genuine person when you're being a coach. Like
That's a good way to put
don't
it.
change the game just because you're a coach now.
Yeah.
You know, you want to be honest and truthful and all that, and not a bullshitter. That's the biggest thing for me, is not being a bullshitter. But the last thing I'll say for the coaches is remember why you're there.
Yeah.
Especially in minor hockey. But even when you're coaching in junior or whatever, and like sometimes the game changes and some people are genuinely pursuing being a coach And to a certain degree, then you have to be worried about yourself when you're trying to progress if you want to be a coach, like as a career. And I can understand that. But at the end of the day, the way that you're a good coach is if your players buy into what you're trying to teach them, you know, and we're keeping in mind the reason why you're coaching, which should be, for the most part, you're trying to develop the kids and make sure that your team has fun playing, develops while they're playing, wins some games, and hopefully they can move on to higher levels after that. That should be kind of the goal. It's not about I'm the coach and everybody look at me on the bench because I'm the coach of the team. Even when you get to the higher ages, even if you want to go on to be an OHL or an NHL coach or whatever, it takes getting the result with your team to get there. And I haven't seen it happen often where the coach is all about me, and that working out. Sometimes it does.
Yeah, or another side of that is the coach that coaches to make money.
Right.
In youth hockey.
Yeah.
Like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but some coach just to make money.
Yeah.
And that's not the area you should be doing that in.
Yeah.
But any coach that hears that and thinks I'm offside, then they shouldn't listen to this anyways.
Yeah, that's right. Right? That's right.
Now, when I say that, though, it doesn't mean that you can't. Right. It doesn't mean that you can't.
It's the intention again, man.
It's
like,
the
what's
intention.
The intention,
If you're
right?
coaching, because I knew some guys in Detroit, holy crap, man.
Yeah.
The guy coached 4 or 5 different teams, couldn't coach his way out of a wet paper bag. Had all these different teams. So I asked him one day, I said, so what do you do for a living? He goes, looks at me like, what do you mean? The question was, what do you do for a living? Yeah. Like, I'm normal, bud. I'm a normal human. I'm asking a freaking question.
Yeah.
Well, coach hockey. I go, what, like this stuff? Adam, Pee Wee, U13? Yeah, I'm a hockey coach. I said, okay. So he goes around and pimps himself out for every team to make 10 grand here, 8 grand here. Like, yeah, that's the guy you don't want coaching. Trust me. Because he cares about getting paid, and he'll coach anyone, anytime to get paid and whatever. So, but now, having said that, sometimes it doesn't make sense to go out and coach a team because you're losing money. Okay. Expenses should be paid. Okay. There's maybe a depending on where you live, a minimum, like a something to entice a coach to coach. I get coaches are,
sure.
You know, I personally wouldn't want to coach youth hockey right now. Yeah. It would cost me money.
Yeah, but it's
but
time,
if someone said,
effort,
okay, well, it's your business, how much do you need? I don't even want to go there, but there are, and there's organizations that pay their coaches, and that's fine, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's fine in youth hockey, I guess. But I digress.
Yeah, no, it just comes down to the intention, man, and that's what I want to leave with for coaches. Like, so, hopefully, going through the kind of the good and bad, coaches we remember or not, is kind of helpful for people that are trying. Even if you're a dad coach, like any of these guys, hopefully there's something useful that you guys can take. But there's a lot of variation within being a good coach that you can follow, but there's some general principles which hopefully they can take what you said about that and apply it, because both of us talking about the good coaches, there's a lot of overlap in why we thought they were good coaches or they were impactful or whatever, right? Obviously, so hopefully that's useful. Anything else? We're good to go.
Good, man.
Okay, cool. See you next week.